Alavander's Orb of Awesomeness, Episode 2, Those Damn Kobolds, is brought to you by the Basement Dwellers Podcast Network. Visit www.tbdpod.com/AOA for more info. Hello, adventurers, and welcome back to Alavander's Orb of Awesomeness, a D&D podcast where we explore our love for all things Dungeons and Dragons. My name is Wes.
And I'm Chris.
And together we are your gracious hosts. What's up with you, my friend? Good morning.
Oh, good morning. It is a beautiful Saturday morning here in sunny West Michigan.
Yep. I woke up surprised to find that we had power.
I heard that that like you lost literally everything for like 2 days.
Yeah, it's been really stupid. Like that's Michigan for you, I guess. Any new developments in your gaming world?
Ooh, sort of. The game that I've been, well, actually, it's not sort of. It is a development. The game that I've been in for the last year here is actually going to be wrapping up next week.
Ooh.
We're going to come to the conclusion. I've been playing a tiefling tempest fighter, so they specialize in using 2 weapons. And I use 2 spiked shields.
Yeah,
as my weapons.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the game's going to be wrapping up next week, and then I think we're going to take a break for a little bit.
Yeah, we our group is actually meeting tomorrow to start off the next leg of our new adventure. We are going to be using the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book that came out for 5th edition. It's a re-release of older adventures that I don't remember when they first came out, but they've been updated to 5th edition, and the actual town of Saltmarsh has been fleshed out a bit more. Originally we were going to go right from the starter edition, the Lost Mine of Phandelver, right into Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Okay.
I've been looking forward to doing that for a long time, probably since like the middle of us playing the other campaign, but they wanted kind of a intermediate adventure to go in between that, just to kind of I kind of took a poll in our group, and they wanted to do something a bit more or a bit less confined to one area. So, yeah, because we've been in the Phandalin region forever, and Dragon Heist takes place just in Waterdeep for the most part. So,
good.
It's a great setting as it is, but they wanted to kind of explore the world a little bit. So, I'm really looking forward to actually moving on and having my group go through a little bit more of the Sword Coast, even though Saltmarsh is technically part of Greyhawk, I believe. The way that they wrote it, I think it was Greyhawk.
Okay.
But the cool thing about the book is that they include like a section that says, if you're running in the Forgotten Realms, this is where Saltmarsh should be located. And it's pretty cool. But I'm excited because a lot of the stuff in there is kind of it's very conducive to homebrew. So I'm going to be kind of just taking the stuff that they offer in the book and making my own adventure from it for tomorrow. Which I haven't even written yet, so it's going to take some DM magic.
Inspiration sometimes hits you right in the moment, and there were a lot of times in my my gaming sessions that life got in the way. I couldn't plan anything, and we had the most fun because I was just making it up.
Yeah.
And if you can put on here's a quick DM tip for you. If you can put on the air that everything, your players will never know the difference.
Yeah, it's like being a musician on stage and messing up, and most people don't notice that you mess up unless you're the musician.
Exactly. You just gotta roll with it, And if they want to try to do a backflip over the cage of the pit of dragons, the pit of tigers, and they've got like an impossible chance to do it, but you know what? Let them try.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also looking forward to, and I'm hoping it works out in our favor. But we are kind of setting a time limit on our game session, and in the past we've always kind of just played until the energy died in the room.
Yeah.
And what I have found, particularly through the last couple sessions that we've played, is that it really puts a strain on your story. And I didn't want that to happen this time around. So it's kind of maybe an experiment, but maybe like a thoughtful experiment, I guess. Like we kind
for sure.
Yeah, we're trying to limit our game time. That way everyone knows, hey, you know, I don't know. I just have this feeling that it's going to keep the energy up throughout the entire session, as opposed to, you know, everyone kind of giving the cue that they're done.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I get that 100%.
I don't really know how else to describe it, but I'm hoping I'm hoping it'll make. Okay, let me rephrase all of that rambling I just said, and just say that I'm hoping that it will improve the quality of the game by making it more focused. Yes. And so we're going to be putting some extra effort into role playing and exploring our characters' backstories, because that was my first time following an actual module when when we ran Lost Mine. So it was kind of, there were times where our group role playing together would have been preferable to us trying, or as opposed to just trying to advance the story and get to the next area, which is kind of what we ended up doing, just because we wanted to get through it.
I agree. I understand it completely. For us in the old, I don't want to say older generation, because we're not that old.
No.
But we have other things in our life that has to take precedence sometimes over our hobby. And I've found that when you can schedule that actual time, you can say, okay, we're going to start, we meet and greet at 4:00, and we get into the game at 5. And from 5 until 9 or 5 until 10 is us gaming.
It's on.
In that capacity, it does focus the party. It lets them know, hey, this is what needs to get done. But also as a DM, it helps you, because then you can say, okay, I need to, instead of planning for 100 hours of gaming for a night or whatever, you can say, okay, I only need to plan on maybe 6 or 7 hours. And, if we don't get to some of that, then it's 5 hours. And then you can use your time more wisely on making that set time more fruitful.
Yep. So, to move things on, what you can expect from this episode, aside from all of that. We're going to be presenting our first player tip section on how to get into character. We're going to then give some history on a really cool event in Forgotten Realms lore called the Spellplague.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's cool. And last but not least, Chris is going to be leading our first Monster Manual Spotlight, where he's going to give us some info on everyone's favorite little reptile nuisances, kobolds. So, without further ado, all right, everyone, welcome to our player tips segment, where we will give you some of our tips on how to become
the best player in D&D history.
In this episode's player tips, we're going to talk a bit about how we get into character. Chris, let's start with you. What do you do when you sit down to play at a table with a fresh character sheet?
Well, for me, we have to back up a little bit, because how I tend to make my characters is I will pick a personality trait or a quirk about my own self, right? And I'll take that and expand that out into its most extreme to a point, right? So I'll use my 4th edition character, Chiron Sokias. I wanted him to be like a consummate soldier and like not a leader, right? So I took the portion of my body and the portion of my identity, the hardworking, steadfast kind of part of me, and I extrapolated that out to, okay, he's a line soldier, so he's going to be very short and to the point. He's not about niceties or about talking his way out of things, because that he has no time for that. Action is what is needed. So kind of delving into that, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll look at some other characters who are like that. And I kind of picked up on Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation. Very
good example.
To the point about things. You know, he has a code. He has a way about himself, how he carries himself with honor and trying to be distinguished. Sometimes my own personal idiocies, I'll call them, like to kick in, and I sometimes am the comic relief. That's more my natural personality.
Yeah.
You know, but that's an example of that character. A different character that I've played a few different times in different games. Quinn Truesdale, nice guy,
TM.
Cleric of TM, Cleric of Palor, just radiates just niceness and wants to help. He's a pacifist. He doesn't harm people. He will defend himself, but he will never kill, and just wants to help others. You know, for me to get into the personality of a character is to kind of take a part of my own personality and expand that out into what would the extreme of this be. So I guess that's kind of how I get into it. You know, I don't do a lot of accents, but I tend to, you know, change the pitch of my voice. You know, Quinn Truesdale, nice guy. You know, hey friend, hello. You know, I'll go in kind of the upper range. But Chiron is more down here and very to the point.
Very Batman-y.
Kind of, yeah. Just a lot of grumbling, a lot of
yeah. It's been a while since I've actually been a player, so it's kind of hard for me to think about it. But when I think what you brought up was a good point. You know, taking a bit of your personality and kind of punching it out and making that a very like a focal point for how the character is, and that's the thing with role playing. And you know, you're sitting around a table and you're doing voices and you're talking as your character. You almost have to pick something like that in order to distinguish your character from anybody else's. And really, you know, D&D does allow for you to be a very unique representation of your character, you know, however you want to do it. But you know, if you're first starting out or you're wanting to make a character and you want to kind of a good jumping off point, you should pick one of those classic fantasy tropes that you know, and that's probably the easiest way that you can do, or easiest thing that you can do to get into character, is to reference something that has already been done. Yeah. And I've done that quite a bit with some of the characters, just thinking about, I think you mentioned it too, you kind of have like this other character in mind, whether it's one that you create or whether it's one that comes out of like TV, books, or video games or something like that. You kind of have them in mind as you're creating this character, and you know, and that's a good jumping off point, and you should definitely make it your own from that point. But there's no harm in, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants and
taking inspiration from the things around you.
Yep. And then, you know, the whole other layer, there's a whole nother layer when it comes to to accents and actual personality. And really, for me, honestly, I've kind of just let that come out naturally in reaction to what other people are doing. And I will sit there and I will decide, okay, my character is not going to budge on these, you know, these couple things, but they're going to be eager and, you know, excited and animated if these certain things happen. And you can get in trouble if you play it way too extreme, like, you know, I play a lot of rogue characters when I play, so you don't want to be the type of player who's like, I steal everything, and that includes stuff from my party as well. So
yeah, the whole idea of like, you should let your players, and be, as a player, let yourself experiment and kind of get into the world, right? But ultimately, you guys, the party is a group of adventurers working towards completing a task. You know, a good example, I'll go back to the game I've been in. We have a halfling assassin. His whole thing is gathering information. He never steals from the party, like outright. Like, yeah. But there have been times where it's been, oh yeah, I found like 6 diamonds when we were in here. In fact, he found like 8, right?
Yeah. Or
it'll be the control of information. He's been kind of our eyes and ears for literally everything in the world. So he writes down everything, and he uses this as kind of like a character quirk. You know, he's the note taker, but he also in game carries like a notepad or a journal.
Yeah.
A ledger, if you will, to write down everything. So using little quirks like that to kind of fulfill things in your character also helps out. And it's a good segue into the player's handbook with the bonds and flaws section, you know, with the backgrounds. Those are great jumping off points if you're not sure on what you want to do, or if you want to try something different.
Yeah.
You know, picking the acolyte background while you're maybe a fighter or a rogue or even a druid. I mean, picking that, and you found religion of some sort, or you have a patron god that you follow. Picking one of the other backgrounds, like the military orphan. You know, what happened? Why are you an orphan? Obviously, your parents died in some type of war, and you've just been following around this mercenary company or this traveling army, you know, and that kind of gives you some personality quirks.
Yeah, and really what 5th edition does great is it gives you a lot of those prompts and cues to be able to build your character off of. Like, if you're coming from a background of more wargaming type stuff, you're not really going to, worry about, I don't really care about my character's personality. I just care that how much damage his sword does. This is probably not for you, but yeah. If you're really trying to flesh out, a living, breathing, alternate personality of yours, yeah, then those the flaws and the personality traits and the backgrounds that 5th edition provides is a great starting point. A lot of what they offer you, it frees up your brain to think about other things.
Yeah,
and I do believe that all of those the traits and backgrounds and everything do correspond to die rolls too, so you can randomly generate that, can't you?
Oh yeah, all that stuff is a D6 or a D10 generated thing. So you can make a very no, you could just write this stuff down and like plan out your character just from these die rolls.
Well, what should we do? Just kind of an overview of the points that we've made. A good, starting with Chris's, grab a personality trait of yours that you either like or maybe you dislike, and amplify it, put a focus on it. That's a good starting point there. From there, you can one thing we didn't say is try and think about what your role in your party is going to be.
Oh, definitely.
Not everybody's a well-rounded jack of all trades. Like, find something that you envision your character being like the best at. Like, this is the reason why you were there, and run with that. That can help with your personality as well. Finding little focal points, I guess, is the overall tip that we would give. Find little find your focal points and amplify them to an almost comical level. Pull it back just enough so where you're not disruptive to the party. But maybe that's your thing too. Maybe you are a Kender-like character, And you
No, there's a whole can of worms that I think needs to be an episode.
Maybe that's your thing. Maybe you're like this very intensely curious character who is always getting the group into trouble, and all of them are grumbling as you enter a room. That can be your thing too.
So overall, the main point I think that we should stress is experiment. Trying out a character archetype that is way different than yourself.
Yeah. So all right, that will end our first player tip segment. Woo! In this installment of Forgotten Lore, we're going to be talking about a cataclysmic event in the history of the Forgotten Realms, the Spellplague. Essentially, in boiled down terms, the Spellplague was an event where the forces of magic, or the Weave as it is known, ceased to function properly. This event was sparked by a growing feud between Mystra, the goddess of the Weave and magic itself, and Shar, a goddess of the dark and creator of the counterpart to the Weave, known as the Shadow Weave. Shar created the Shadow Weave out of jealousy of Mistra's powers. But even after its creation, Shar wanted more. It's then that Shar enlisted the help of another god of the astral plane, Sirik, the god of murder, to kill Mystra. Shar had hoped that with Mystra gone, she would gain control over the forces of the Weave. But this was not the case. With the murder of Mystra, in 1385 DR, the very fabric of the arcane that had been historically held together for eons had now been corrupted by Sirik's influence, and the raw magic contained within the Weave was unleashed upon the planes, creating the cataclysmic event later known as the Spellplague. The Spellplague affected all of the magic users of the realms, to the point where they were either destroyed, or for those unlucky few that survived, were driven completely mad and lost the ability to channel their powers for good. The Spellplague itself manifested in Toril, which is basically the equivalent of Earth in the Forgotten Realms setting, as a storm of blue flames that spread throughout the entirety of the realms through the use of infected portals. In addition to spreading over the prime material plane, the Spellplague also wreaked havoc on other planes and worlds. One of more particular note was the world of Albir, which was home to Tymanchibar, the nation capital of the Dragonborn race. When the Spellplague reached Albir, it detonated, causing a massive explosion which transported a portion of that world into Toril. So all in all, the Spellplague completely changed not only the way that magic functioned, but it also changed the face of Toril as well.
That was awesome. I never knew that.
Might as well add some dramatic flair to our lore segments, but yeah. So what kind of stands out to you? Like, what do you want to know about, man? I'm now more well versed in Spellplague history, so
yeah.
What do you want to know, man?
No, that's an interesting that's interesting stuff. I mean, I had no idea that was where the Dragonborn race came from in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, I didn't either, because a lot of the stuff that I have read about Dragonborn kind of just talks about just them as a people as opposed to where they came from. And frankly, a lot of things that I've read say that people aren't really sure where the Dragonborn came from. But all that information was taken from the Forgotten Realms wiki site. So it's kind of a collection of actually really well-sourced lore bits. So so if you want to learn more, you can search the Forgotten Realms wiki. But yeah, I think the thing that I find really interesting about the Spellplague is how they used it. And I didn't cover that too much in the narration there, but some facts about it is that they kind of used the Spellplague to mark the changes in the D&D editions as far as how magic was done, particularly between like 3.5, and then 4th edition when they introduced the powers and at-will powers, because what the Spellplague did, essentially what it did was it turned the concept of magic, which has been this long and ancient thing, and it turned it upside down and on its head, and basically said, oh, you used to be able to do this, now you can't. Oh, now you're crazy. But what they kind of allowed this event to do is change the way that magic was handled in the game as well. So that kind of would explain 4th edition's use of like encounter powers and the being able to use magic without having to study it so much. It doesn't say that it was like kind of where the time of sorcerers who don't have to really study their magic. They're more like just innate powers.
Yeah, they're born with it.
Yeah. The Spellplague doesn't necessarily, that wasn't like the introduction of sorcerers, but it kind of lends itself more to that style of magic, to where a lot of what it did was a lot of the magic that was cast was cast in different ways. Traditionally, it was you study a spell, you study a book, you study your manipulation of the weave as a wizard, as a dedicated student to that.
Yeah, to that particular school of magic.
Yeah, and with when the Spellplague happened, first off, initially there's a lot more that goes into what happened during the Spellplague, but that would require lots of other forgotten lore segments, which we will probably get to. It deals a lot with what the changes that happened on the different planes, and it's just it's a whole rabbit hole if you really want to go down that, which I do, but for the purposes of this segment, we had to kind of focus on just the one area. But so what the Spellplague had an effect on magic. Couple of things that it did was that despite all the efforts with the structure of magic out of balance, many spells just kind of failed outright, and the ones that did go off kind of produced unreliable results. And in the book series that I'm reading right now by Elaine Cunningham, I'm reading the elf song. I think it's called Songs and Swords trilogy, or no, actually I think there's 5 books in it. But anyway, one of the characters in there kind of describes a period during the Spellplague where she was with an adventuring party, and she was the sole survivor of that famous adventuring party because the magic user in her group used a fireball spell, and instead of it shooting forth and at the target, it just literally lit all of the other party members on fire, and they died.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So she developed this fear of magic because of that. And understandably so. But it was kind of just a quick nod to the Spellplague that really got me interested in learning more about it. After the initial terror of the Spellplague receded, mages discovered that it had changed the way magic worked entirely. This is what I was talking about with they found that many spells were more difficult to access and now required elaborate rituals instead of how they used to be. Others became so easy that wizards could cast them at will. So to me, that translates into, kind of what a lot of the 5th edition cantrips, how they're actual spells, and you can cast them at will. Like that kind of, that might be a nod to that direction. And also, from what I remember of 4th edition, the encounter powers and stuff like that, it would explain that.
At least for the magic type users.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. When you first got into 4th edition, we thought it was just more emulating, more massively multiplayer online games. Yeah. Where with this, them kind of adding this flavor to it, and it kind of makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not, like I said, that's kind of a connection that I'm maybe reaching for myself. I have not looked into whether that was the actual explanation for that. But regardless, you can use that history in your games to explain some really cool things with magic if you want to. So if you want if you want to bring that into your game, being like, you know, magic, like, let's pretty much, after the Spellplague, things went wonky for I believe it was a lot of years. I'm trying to remember. I've heard 10 and I've also heard 100. So one of those zeros is in there somewhere, but
right.
You know, plus or minus a zero. But after it happened, and that was actually it ended once Mistra returned, which a lot of the lore behind the gods basically says that they can be destroyed, but they will come back. It's just a matter of time when they come back. So basically what they did from the overall history of the Spellplague and how it changed magic was Spellplague happened. Magic was really messed up for a while. Then with the return of Mistra, it went back to how it was. So to me, how that corresponds to the gaming world is they, you know, Wizards basically said, hey, we're going to take a chance and this is how magic is going to be for a while. And and then they're like, oh, no, we want to change it back. So that's kind of what it translates to me. But like I said, it's hard to get into the specifics of the Spellplague. That's why it's such a cool event, is because it affected so much.
And the whole world.
Yeah.
I mean, it affected the entire world on how magic
the
and
world, the planes, everything.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's hard to get into it without getting into so many different lore segments. I mean, maybe not many people know this, but D&D, like, the entire thing is a multiverse. That's why you have Forgotten Realms, Eberron, Greyhawk. You have Kryn from Dragonlance. Like, you have all those worlds, and what is it? Ibir. What was it? Albir. Yep.
Albir.
Different planets, different worlds. So, you know, that's kind of their way to explain how everyone's homebrew can actually exist in canon.
You know, use that little tidbit in your games to just open up whole new possibilities. You know, your sorcerer who's used to casting, prismatic orb, it now is just nothing but black and dark and evil. And you're like, that's terrifying.
Yep. And technically, in terms of current D&D history, this happened all in 1385 DR, which I said is like the most common. I believe 5th edition currently is in somewhere in the 1500s now. So this is several hundred years after the events of the Spellplague. But, you know, you can always take it and say that, remnants of... Actually, there still are remnants of the Spellplague in the form of, like, blue flame. I believe in Neverwinter, there is a section of the land that was actually torn open by the Spellplague, and there are still blue flames in those areas as well. Don't go there.
Lots of inspiration for your home brews, or if you want to run your game in the Forgotten Realms. That's just super fascinating to me. It is.
To run through a few more facts before we end this segment. The effects that it had on the planes, the world tree was destroyed, which, again, that's another lore segment. The whole world tree concept is a segment that we'll have to go through, because that whole multiverse concept has gone through several changes throughout D&D history.
Definitely.
And I'm not sure if they kind of retconned it or if there's actual lore explanations for why it changed, but we'll get into it in a different segment. Most of the outer planes were either destroyed or merged with others, and it actually created the astral dominions, which is what we have now.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it not only changed the face of Toril, which is the main world in Forgotten Realms, but it also changed so many other things. Other effects, the Spellplague affected the landscape of Toril, making the ground rumble and heave up and down like the surface of the sea. Curtains of blue flame swept through the landscape, reshaping the land. It basically created chaos throughout everything. And also, this is kind of a cool thing that is, if you play the Neverwinter MMO, you can see you can see this when you are in Neverwinter, but all around Toril, shards of earth were kind of cast up in the air, and they float there, and they're called earth motes. So there's all these floating islands around. That's because of the Spellplague.
Interesting.
Yeah. So basically, like, you know, the laws of gravity don't really apply because they're kind of in between two planes, if you can imagine that. But so that's a cool thing you can add to your games. It's something that I had always kind of known existed. I just didn't know how they got there or why they're there. I just assumed, you know, hey, it's just magic.
It's just magic. Well, it is just magic. Exploding everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. There was a whole bunch of tsunamis that were sent across the world, which basically swallowed up a lot of villages and towns and even continents, not continents, but like entire areas,
whole regions. Yeah.
Like there was I forget the name of it, but there was an entire like the halfling homeland, pretty much. I forgot.
Oh geez.
Yeah, it's gone. Like it's
interesting.
It's gone. So now they're everywhere.
And that's just another good example of just how you could use this particular event as an adventure hook.
Yep.
You know, search for the lost halfling civilization.
Yeah.
You know, you have to get riding sharks and have spells that let you cast, you know, to breathe underwater.
Riding sharks.
And now you have you have a whole adventure under the sea now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in Neverwinter, the city was not hit as hard by the Spellplague, but it had a lot of effects on the city. Castle Never and the Cloak Tower. The Cloak Tower in Neverwinter was actually sent to a different realm. Like, it just up and disappeared. There's a Fallen Tower. Chunks of earth near and in Neverwinter's Docks district became Earth Motes. Which are the floating islands.
Yeah.
Let's see here. And there was actually a small, they call them plague lands, basically just like the twisting, like the areas that were twisted by the Spellplague, were formed in the Underdark, like the realm of the
drow,
and everything.
Yeah.
Right below in Neverwinter, so it affected below the earth as well. In Waterdeep. Again, this is bringing up a lot of lore things that I really want to get into eventually. But in Waterdeep, they have these things called they're the walking statues of Waterdeep. They don't walk anymore, but they were the ruler of like the Archmage of Waterdeep is known as the Blackstaff, and the Blackstaff used to control these walking statues of Waterdeep, which were used to kind of during like the troll wars and everything, were used to defend the city. Well, the Spellplague, you can only imagine the effects that it has on these 90-foot tall walking statues. So basically they went crazy, and a couple of them basically had to be immobilized somehow because they were no longer able to be controlled by the Blackstaff. But some of them, most of them already resided in the ethereal plane. That was kind of how, like, their like their little garage, I guess, where they were stored, and they were brought out when they were needed. But because of the Spellplague, it shifted everything and merged a lot of things. So a lot of them appeared in Waterdeep, and they just started rampaging. So, but now they're dormant. That we know of. But that's great lore segment that we'll get to eventually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I think that is a great start to our lore segment, and that I think that offers a lot of cool, interesting role play and game adventure moments for somebody. I mean, I love the idea of having to either stop the rampaging water giants, the water statues, or you have to reactivate them to stop a different catastrophe. Yeah. I mean, that's so cool.
It's very cool to think about, but we could make several shows just about all this. So I'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll move on. So thanks for listening, guys. Okay, so we are going to kick it to our very first Monster Manual Spotlight with Chris. What do you got for us, man?
Well, like we said at the top of the show, kobolds. Very unassuming creatures.
Those
right?
damn kobolds.
Yeah. That's kind of the mentality that a lot of players and a lot of like in character people have. They're a nuisance. They're, something to just be kicked aside. Right. They're little level 1 things that you fight against at the beginning of your adventures, like the giant rats or the goblins, which is a whole nother episode. But I think that kobolds can be one of the most dangerous and challenging monsters that you can face in your D&D party.
I don't believe you.
So you don't? Well, let me tell you. So we'll kind of back it up a little bit. Like, what is a kobold? So they're a humanoid, like reptilian humanoid race. They're anywhere between 2 to 2.5 feet tall, 35 to 45 pounds. Scaled skin. They can be a couple different colorations depending on their genealogy. They're related to the dragon races, and actually a lot of them kind of revere dragons as a symbol of power and a symbol of strength. They actually do have their own deity, Kurtulmak, as a patron deity of the kobolds, and they claimed he gave them life. After he created the kobolds and taught them the skills of thieving and pillaging, the gnomes entered into an eternal conflict with his creations, angering him. And there's several other myths and legends. But yeah, Kurtulmak and the gnome god, Garl Glittergold, are rival deities toward each other. So that could be a very interesting dichotomy if you have a gnome in the group who may have just a hatred of kobolds, like naturally. Yeah. So Wes, what in your adventuring life did you ever see kobolds as? What was kind of your first?
Well, now that I know what they look like,
yeah,
it's a completely different image in my head. But when my first experience with kobolds, I had no idea that they were I had no idea that they were reptilian. Believe it or not. Like the way that when I first started playing D&D, when we'd run into kobolds, this was 2nd edition days, I had no idea that they were reptilian creatures. I always thought they were kind of these goblinoid type, like just like an offshoot of goblins for the most part.
Right.
And that was just kind of maybe my, back then everything for us was theater of the mind. So that was just kind of how I pictured them. So I guess my first surprise with kobolds was realizing that they are these little dragon people.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised that you didn't bring up like World of Warcraft, because they have kobolds in that game, and they do not look like little dragon men. In fact, they look like little mice men.
Yeah,
little rat men.
And
yeah,
that's kind of more the image that I kept in my head, because of that. I mean, I played D&D well before that, or for a few years before that, or actually no, well before. I don't know. Time, right?
Yeah, time.
But that was probably the first visual representation that I had of kobolds. I never owned any of the D&D books or the monster manuals or compendiums or whatever they were. And the way that they were always described, when we were fighting them, was just these little, it was just kobolds. I mean, that was just kind of like,
yeah, well, and like I said at the top of the segment, they kind of get lumped in with goblins because they're another small creature race.
Yeah, they're like cannon fodder for adventurers. That's how.
Yeah,
you asked about conceptions and everything like that, and that's kind of what I view goblins and kobolds kind of in the same light, to where alone they are not a challenge whatsoever, but their challenge comes in how quickly they can overwhelm a party just by how many of them there are.
Yes, a lot of times most DMs and most players tend to come across kobolds, maybe in a small den, and you're maybe going to fight 10 to 15 of them spread out over maybe, 5 at a time, But Kobold society, they live in dark, ideally underground or thick forests. They're a very tribal society. Their lairs are often overcrowded. So a good way to imagine it is just you have hundreds of these kobolds in one area, So when we come across them, it's almost not. It's too hard to represent that really sometimes in pen and paper D&D unless you're doing something where this square of kobolds, this 2x2 square is like 6 or 7 kobolds. It's like a swarm of them.
Yeah.
They love digging. They're big miners. Ideally, this is what they would love. They would love to just be left alone to dig and to breed. That's all they want. But other races and other humanoids tend to kick them around or subjugate them to make them into their minions.
Oh, so these are like the misunderstood creatures.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
100%. Naturally they're very, they're fundamentally selfish creatures, right? They want to hoard things. They want what they want, what their tribe wants. So they're naturally kind of evil creatures. But in that same vein, their reliance on the strength of their group makes them lean more towards lawful. Lawful evil, actually the monster manual has them as lawful evil creatures.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, they will attack you if you threaten them or if they think that they can get what they want. But they still have a hierarchy. They still have a society that allows them to thrive and survive if they don't get just their hovel smashed in by adventurers and their whole tribe genocidally murdered. I mean, an interesting tidbit, kobolds actually mature. They're at maturity at about 10 to 13 years old. Like that's like you're an adult, but they have the ability to live till they're like 120 years old. Yeah, right? But rarely do they ever get the chance to.
Because someone picks them off.
Because someone picks them off, or they're subjugated and they're basically used as fodder, like we said.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of different sub-races of kobolds, think of a different type of region, like there's aquatic kobolds, Arctic kobolds.
Really?
Desert. Yeah, just depending on the realm or the region that they're in, because just like any other creature, they'll adapt and evolve into their surroundings. Like I said, they primarily live underground, so dark vision is a big thing for them. They see very well. They actually have a bad sensitivity to light. Rules wise for the monster, if you are going to fight them, means they get disadvantage while they're in sunlight on attack rolls, as well as on wisdom perception checks. Kind of some of their big tactics are all pack mentality. The strength of a kobold is in the number of kobolds.
Yeah.
The tribe is important. So when they attack and when they use their abilities, it's all based around the more of us, the better. Again, to the monster manual. Pack tactics, the kobold has advantage on attack rolls against the creature if at least one of the kobold's allies is within 15 feet or 5 feet of the creature. So they always, exactly, right? So they're always going to roll, like they may not hit very hard, but they're going to get advantage. They're going to hit you more.
That's pretty dangerous. I wonder if goblins have that same thing.
I think it's similar.
I might look while you're talking if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Just because I'm curious, but
yeah, and honestly, the stat block isn't crazy. I mean, they're pretty weak when it comes to certain abilities. So strength, they have a 7. So they're small, they're tiny creatures, right?
Yeah.
Dexterity is very high because they're used to being shifty and sneaky and using the shadows to their advantage. Constitution 9, intelligence 8, wisdom 7, charisma 8. That kind of lends to the nature of them. They're physical. They make up for their physical ineptitude with cleverness for trap making. This is the kobold's strength. So this is kind of a tip for DMs here. if your adventurers come into a Kobold hold and it seems like it's too easy to get through, that's because there is, and they're about to fall into every trap imaginable. Use this to your advantage, right?
Oh yeah.
Because no one thinks anything kobolds. But when you've got rockfall traps, punji pits, you've got spear traps, all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Of that nature. You know, sometimes they're simple traps, but you can also kind of twist that around and make them into even more elaborate traps. A good example is like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they're in the temple and there's all kinds of like letter traps and saw blades flying out and, you know, hidden rocks, bridges because of just how the stone is shaped. You know, you can really expand into that.
Yeah.
Their lairs were often overcrowded, although when one tribe became too numerous, it splits into numerous smaller ones. The overcrowding eliminated the concept of privacy, so kobolds slept in communal areas. The ultimate goal of the tribe is to thrive.
Yeah.
So, you know, overbreeding and expanding. They know common, just like every other race in D&D, but also draconic. So they know how to speak the language of the dragons. Often create their lairs by mining them from rock. Mining was a meticulously planned and conducted process where nothing was left to chance. You know, and a lot of people also use kobold as kind of just like pick and stab and poke and prod, where they are actually highly attuned to magic.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Divination magic. Sorcerers are kind of a big thing where there's kind of like imbued with that draconic magic, you know, fire breathing. Or, you know, fire stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really, they're just like any other race. They have their fears and wants. You know, they have religion. You know, they are omnivores. They'll pretty much eat anything. You know, for sure, they are definitely a evil race. Overall, I mean, they're greedy. They will take what they want. But you can also flip it around. You know, you could have a kobold. And a good example is when I ran a 4th edition game many years ago, I had an NPC that came with the party. They had raided found a kobold hold, and they basically took care of everything except for one lone kobold who he just wanted to get out. He wanted to explore the world. He had hopes and aspirations. His name was TAC. TAC. And many years ago, many seasons, his brothers Tick and Tock had been killed, and he ended up joining the party as an NPC. So I actually made him as a character. And luckily, at this point, the monster manual gave us rules for running or to make a player character from different monsters, Kobold being one of them. And the same stands true for 5th edition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the actual monster manual in 5th edition, well, it doesn't give you options to make it as a character, but I believe it's Volo's Guide to Monsters.
You are correct. Yes.
I think that's the one where you can start to play. You could make monster races into character class or character races.
Exactly.
Okay.
So. That's definitely a cool way to be able to kind of introduce kobolds into your game as well, is let one of your players be one. You know, they get a bonus to dexterity, though they get a -2 strength, just because of their size and their build. You know, you still get dark vision. You get the pack tactics trait, but also grovel, cower, and be. As an action on your turn, you can cower pathetically to distract nearby foes. Until the end of your next turn, your allies gain advantage on attack rolls against enemies within 10 feet of you that can see you. Once you use this trait, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You know, throughout all of this, I'm having a higher degree of respect for this cannon fodder race. That at least that's how I've always treated them. I was surprised like I said, surprised to know that they're little dragon men, but also surprised that they are, at least in the 5th edition monster manual, like they're actually pretty badass when you look at what they can do. Like, they basically, until you're near the end of the battle, they will have advantage as far as rolling, which is pretty crazy. And I did look up, goblins do not have that, so there's a pretty good distinction between the cannon fodder races in this. But that's neat. And I also did not know that there are several different types. I mean, it makes sense, you know. Humans are the same way. We adapt to our surroundings, so I can imagine that. I think it's cool that they worship dragons, and I also did not know that they hang out in dragons' dens. Like,
yes,
it makes me think that they are comfortable there, which
to a point. Like I said, they definitely are subjugated by that dragon, most likely. But they also revere dragons as a representation of power and whatever. But it's also out of fear, you know. Hey, we're going to follow this dragon because if we don't, he'll kill us. He also feeds us sometimes, maybe, which is great because we like food. I mean, kobolds just kind of get mistreated, represented, and I'm here for you. If I had to give that pitch there, because I think that kobolds are a cool little weird race that has a lot of potential. You know, like I said, just making them be able to be a player character, lets you definitely jump into some weird, cool stuff.
Well, it sounds like if they could break their evil inclinations as far as being in a party, it sounds like they would be actually a pretty big asset, considering like how focused they are on being in a group. Their pack tactics stat or ability, it doesn't say that it applies only if they're near other kobolds, just that near their companions.
They're allies.
They're allies, So that would
kind
be
of the first thing that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that'd be kind of a cool thing to. I don't want to say exploit, but I guess exploit. Like while you're, if they're in a party, I don't know. It's interesting. Like the whole idea of putting monsters in company with our traditional heroes is a very interesting, and I think it could be a really good plot hook, plot point, whatever you want to call it.
Definitely, it adds an interesting level to the role play aspect of it. You add a kobold, which is kind of a hated monster by most civilized standards, into an adventuring party. What does that look like? Does the gnome absolutely despise them? Or is that maybe what needs to bring them together? They need to help each other. Does the paladin just want to smash him, or does the barbarian get tired of his antics, or think that he's really interesting? Maybe the cobalt rides on his shoulders while they're traveling. One of the classes, a couple classes that kind of pop into mind if you were going to play as a player character kobold, rogue kind of lends itself very, very well to, I think, a lot of the abilities. With the whole traps, disarming them, kind of being a jack of all trades on some other things.
Definitely not a frontline fighter.
No, he would not be, or they would not be. Also, magic user. You could have a kobold sorcerer, for instance, being a very potent fire magic type person, or even a kobold cleric. There's an interesting one for you. Right, a shaman of his clan cashed out.
I can see your gears, your DM gears turning in your head right now. And we're not in the same room. So
no, I love the idea of just changing stuff up and playing against type. Heck, even a kobold barbarian, I think would be. A little battle rager would be so intimidating. Think about that, right?
Oh man, I can, and it sounds as funny as a gnome barbarian, which I have seen before.
Yeah,
I guess really when it comes down to it, Yeah, challenging the stereotypes in D&D is an interesting way to add some flavor to your game.
100%.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I hope that this short little segment kind of gives you an idea of, kobolds. They have a very interesting thing, and maybe next time you run them in your game or experience them, think, they're not just cannon fodder. You can make them as intricate or crazy or like really delve deep into their society.
Yeah.
I love kobolds.
Like I said, I think I definitely have a greater respect for them now that we've kind of discussed it a bit. Yeah, so I don't really know what else to add to that. I hesitate saying what I'm going to put in my games on this show because I know some of my players will probably listen to it. But kobolds will probably definitely make an appearance now that I know more about them and know how cool you can make them just by tweaking, or not tweaking, but utilizing a few of the existing features that I feel like get overlooked.
Give them a try. Let your DM creativity flow, and don't just throw them at the party all willy-nilly. They have tactics, and they use them very well. They can kill your party if you're not careful.
Awesome. Okay, that was an awesome Monster Manual spotlight. I had no idea that kobolds could have like that much more depth to them.
Oh yeah.
And like even just discussing it out loud has kind of gotten my brain going as far as like how I can use them differently, because I always feel like the kobolds are kind of like like goblins. You throw them at your players, like, and
even goblins,
like when you're
goblins
bored.
have their own society.
So, yeah, but
that's a whole nother episode for another time.
Yeah, but yeah, I look forward to more of those as well. I also look forward to giving some more lore segments. The Spellplague was just one snapshot of this gigantic history of D&D and the Forgotten Realms. So we will have plenty of content to go over as we go on. But
I want to learn more about the more of the pantheon of Forgotten Realms. I mean, there's some that you obviously know, like Paylor or Cord or whoever, but I'd love to know some of the more specific ones from Forgotten Realms or Eberron. I'm sorry. Anything like that.
Yeah. Before we sign off, we want to give out our info once again. We now have a magic mailbox that delivers your messages directly to us from anywhere. Tell your mailbox gnomes to address your messages to AlavandersOrb at gmail.com. That is Alavanders without the apostrophe. Sorry, grammar people, but they do not allow special characters. Drop us a line, ask us questions, give us feedback. We'd really love to hear about the things you'd like us to talk about. Perhaps just like Chris said, with if you want to know about a certain god or goddess, or the pantheons in general. Just an example, or different creatures you want to learn about. This is what we thrive on. We love talking about this kind of stuff. So
give us suggestions. Let us know in the comments or or email us. Hit us up at Twitter.
And speaking of Twitter, you can send your magically enhanced carrier pigeons to tweet at us at AlavandersOrb. And you can also find us on the Book of Faces at facebook.com/AlavandersOrb.
Those get me every time.
Yeah. Again, if you could, so yeah, find us on there. We are slowly building our Twitter following. I think we have 12 followers right now. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Hello, 12 followers.
But you know what? The D&D community on Twitter, I have already found, is incredibly welcoming and incredibly friendly and fun. And a lot of fun to interact with. So we're hoping we can definitely build ourselves up there. Facebook is Facebook, love it or hate it, but find us on there. We give updates as far as we're going to be giving updates. We just started this whole project, but we're going to be giving updates as far as what we're up to. And you can also check us out on our website, which is www.tbdpod.com/AOA. And you can, find general information about the show. That's kind of just a landing page for now. It's attached to another podcast that I run. So if everything looks not like what you would expect, that's because this is kind of part of the podcast network that we have going on. So
yes.
So check us out there, and I will stop rambling and try and wake up for the rest of the day. Chris, you have an awesome day, dude. I love you.
Hey,
and
I love you too.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with me.
No, thank you for doing this with us, me, all of us. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good day.
Good day.
Good day.